Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Audit Committee meeting of the 30th of September 2020. Welcome to those who are watching online as well. I think before we start, in light of recent events, I think it's important to remind everyone what the role of the Audit Committee is. What it's not is the court to be the judge and jury and deliberate and decide on all the various issues and allegations that have been played out, very unfortunately, in recent weeks and months. What our role is to have oversight and seek assurances around the whole framework of governance, risk management and control. And we need to have assurance around process, that the proper processes are being followed. I have to say, I have personally, and I know others, have sought a whole load of answers regarding process. So questions like, so what process has been enacted? What's the terms of reference? What's the methodology? So these are just questions about process, not that sounds like they've done this, that sounds they haven't done that. It's just purely regarding process. And I think it's right to report that there's been no answers or assurances given around process. And therefore, there will be item 6, urgent business. There will be urgent business that will be brought. At least the majority of that is relating to staffing and will be confidential. But there will be some things that the Chief Executive hopefully will be able to say publicly. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We have no apologies for absence, Chair.
Okay. Now, Stephen Watson's not on the call yet, is he? We are expecting him, so hopefully he joins shortly, if he can. Item 2 is the minutes of the Audit Committee held on the 29th of July and circulated, and this, to be confirmed, is a true record. Can I ask everyone just to cast their eyes again over that, and is there anything that anyone wants to raise on that? Otherwise, could everyone just put their hands up just to show that they're happy that that's a true record? Lovely. Thank you. Item 3, this is disclosure of members' interests, where members disclose if there is anything that they are prejudiced with in any way, whether that's personal, prejudicial, or certainly if it's pecuniary. Does anyone have anything to declare at all? Nope. Item 4, report of the Executive Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer. This is the Corporate Fraud Team Counter Fraud Annual Report, which we receive every September. This is our Appendix A. Chris, are you delivering this?
Thanks, Chair. We have Barry Haig with us, the Corporate Fraud Manager, who will take us through the detail. Thank you.
Brilliant. Morning, Barry.
Barry, you're on mute.
Is that better?
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to go through the annual report for the corporate fraud team, going into some detail of what comes from my team. At the end of March, we consisted of myself, 3 corporate fraud investigators and an administrative assistant. Although since March we have lost, due to resignation, the administrative assistant, so that position will be being advertised and being filled hopefully soon. Moving on, just regards to the page 3, the internal fraud, the number of referrals positively is dropping with regards to internal fraud, and as I explained in the report here, we have had 11 referrals, but 7 of those were relating to the same person. I don't know if somebody had fallen out with somebody to make as many referrals as they did with regards to one person, but all 7 were a repeat of an earlier referral, which we had cleared up with that person's line manager, and there wasn't any action needed. And each subsequent referral was of the same nature, so these were just rejected, and there was no need to look at these. Outstanding cases with regards to internal matters, we do still have 1 case which has been reported previously in other reports. The current climate hasn't helped this case at all, but there will be an update on the outcome of this case in future reports once it's concluded. External fraud. The number of referrals compared to previous reports has increased, but I'll explain this as I go through the report. We have had over 1,750 referrals put onto our fraud case management system between April and March. I think generally in the past it's around about 11 to 1,200, so there is a substantial increase there. But as I say, I'll explain this. There's a breakdown of where the categories of the referrals, ranging from all the revenue areas, council tax, business rates, single person discount, to insurance, tenancy fraud, blue badge, etc. As you'll see, the single person discount number of referrals is almost touching 1,000, which is part of the reason for the increase of referrals. But like I said, I'll explain this here as I go through. With regards to external cases, the reintroduction of joint working with DWP came in, I think we were the last of the rollout, the northern region, in May last year. We've had 21 cases that have been investigated with DWP. Obviously in the current climate, and none of these have progressed significantly. So they're still outstanding, and results of these will be produced in future reports. The benefit of working with DWP is that any case where there is enough evidence to proceed with criminal charges is all done through Crown Prosecution Service via DWP. So it does relieve a little bit of weight from our own legal team if the cases were being taken ourselves. Part of the work we do obviously still involves housing benefit, although this is reducing with the continuous rollout of universal credit. But although we don't investigate housing benefit directly, it does impact on housing benefit claims, the work we do. So during the year, we've still identified just under 70,000, so just over 68,000, sorry, of housing benefit overpayments that we'll cover through our recovery team. But as I say, this is expected to reduce as time goes on, with more people moving on to universal credit and the housing benefit claims ending. Council tax support area. The overpayments figure is lower than normal, and not wanting to repeat myself, I will explain obviously the reason for this. But the council tax support figures is just over 22,000 for the year. The reason for this is that the focus has been placed on single person discount cases. And as I said previously, we've raised over 950 cases on single person discount. Just under 900 of those have come from a proactive exercise to target single person discount. And we've used the data hub that we have to facilitate this. So from 882 cases we've raised from IDIS, that's the name of the data hub. This has got a direct link with TransUnion, so we conduct direct credit searches, and it gives us a risk factor of who we should be targeting. So from these 882 cases that we had been identified as high risk, 426 of these cases were closed with a result. The value of this result is in excess of £175,000. Now I'll try and break this figure down, because it's not all actual money that will come back into the council, but part of it certainly is. Part of this £175,000 is made up from past single person discount that people have had a benefit of that we will recover on the council tax accounts. But also part of it is the future value that, had we not looked at these cases, this is what we would have been giving in single person discount had we not identified these errors. So because of the success of this initial proactive exercise, we now propose to continue targeting single person discount over the next 2 years and look at all cases that have single person discount, which is approximately 50,000 council tax accounts. So moving on from the revenue side of it, we'll continue to work with Homes for Northumberland, the partnership with them on the right to buy applications, and this is still year on year proven to be success. We'll conduct anti-money laundering checks, identity checks, and residency checks on each application. Over the year, we've had 95 applications for the right to buy of our housing stock, and from these 95, 32 were withdrawn following our intervention, which again is very similar to previous years. It's about a 30% withdrawal rate that we see that we have year on year. Of these 32 properties being sold, the discount that we would have given on these properties is in excess of 1.1 million. So that figure's been saved against the value of the properties that we would have sold. And in keeping those properties, obviously we'll continue to let those properties and still generate income through the rental system, but that we don't evaluate that, or we don't quantify that figure. Still working with Homes for Northumberland, we have recovered 11 properties that have been either people have vacated or they're just not resident and they're living elsewhere and not told us. So with the return of these keys, we can obviously relet them to people on the housing list. Under the current guidelines of the Cabinet Office, the NFI report, the recovery of these 11 properties is worth just over 1 million. It's estimated at 93,000 per property. I think this is worked out at an approximate value of how much it would cost to rebuild a property had we not put it back into use. If we keep thinking it's in use, we need to still generate more properties. So this is how they come to this estimated figure, and it's a national figure that's used. I think obviously the London figure is higher than ours, but we use the rest of the country figure, which is 93,000. Moving on from the tenancy work that we do, the work with our insurance team is continuing to develop, and referrals are increasing year on year. During the year, we've closed 22 referrals that have come to us from the insurance team. With 3 of these, we've actually denied liability on from the evidence that we've supplied the insurance team. Also issuing 1 sanction from the information the person making the claim has provided, who have identified a different area of fraud. From memory, I believe it was council tax fraud of somebody living there. So they were issued a caution for not declaring someone living there. But the cases that were denied liability had a value of over 35,000. And this is a direct cost to the council from the insurance company. Once we reach our excess, this money does come from our funds. And also the school allocations, again, we still continue to work with them when required, although we haven't done any proactive exercises with them on allocation on school placements. But if they have any cases that they do need to refer to, they do so. And we've had 4 cases where we've had 1 school place withdrawn, and the figure given to us by the schools placed on the value of that school place is 3,850. Looking forward to proactive work that we hope to do. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Audit Data Hub, we hope to utilise that in more areas. Not just single person discount, it does have purpose for other areas, tenancy areas, any kind of data sets that we have from our own systems, we can cross-check them to identify errors. And we have done in the past reports, as I've explained, we run like a payroll exercise against single person discount. So it is proven to be a useful tool, and we'll continue to use that to identify any fraud or error. The right to buy verification and money laundering checks are again still a top priority. So hopefully we envisage to expand the work with HFN to conduct tenancy reviews and maybe a review of home finder list, trying to use IDIS. But obviously that needs to be analysed a bit further to see how that can work, and the data that home finder holds as to whether it's usable. Staying on the tenancy side, and that will continue to work with external partners, Carbon Homes and Benicia, providing the same work. It's a chargeable service that we do charge Carbon and Benicia for. It's the same work that we do for Homes for Northumberland on right to buy and right to acquire applications. And for Carbon, we conducted 39 applications, with 14 of these being withdrawn. That saved Carbon a discount of just over £500,000, and the service only cost them just over £11,500 for the 39 applications. Benicia came on board in mid-August, so halfway through the year, about 5 months into the year. But for Benicia, we still had 31 applications, so it looks like we're probably going to generate a little bit more work from Benicia. 32 applications, but of these, 13 of them were withdrawn. So again, we're still looking at the 30+ withdrawal rate, not just for ourselves, but for Carbon and for Benicia as well. Saving Benicia just under £350,000 in discount that would have been allowed for them on their properties at a cost of £9,600, which the council invoiced them for. And the Tenancy Fraud Forum that we created alongside Durham County Council is still active. Although I think obviously during lockdown I don't think they've had a meeting, but they are looking to do some online work. But it is being brought up. Our regional group is now being brought up at the national tenancy fraud arena, so it is getting recognition of how successful it is, which is obviously a credit to Amy Hodgson, one of the investigators, who was the main focus behind creating this group. And thank you, committee, and that's the end of the report.
Thank you very much, Barry. As ever, you always give a very fulsome, detailed report, and we appreciate that and all the work you do. Certainly, I think from my own experience with residents, they've really tightened up on the right to buy. I've had residents who haven't done anything wrong whatsoever, but they've faced quite a lot of questions. I had a resident who was asked lots of questions, and they had a mortgage already, and a family member said, "Oh, look, would it be easy if I just lent you the money?" And then they're told that's an unauthorized lender. But they're obviously really on top of it, which was frustrating for the resident. He got there, but they're obviously really tightening up on this.
They do, yes. I mean, what we've got to go through the same process with every application to find the ones that are untoward and where the funding isn't always legitimate. It's essentially a business transaction that the council do with our residents, so we have to make sure we are not part of any illegal money from any illegal source. So unfortunately, the same process has to apply to every application, whether they're genuine or not.
Gordon, did I see your hand up?
Yes, please. Thanks, Jim. This is obviously very important work of the council, and growing. I shouldn't say we welcome it. I should say we welcome it being done so thoroughly. One question I've got to ask is regarding the use of the Crown Prosecution Service, where we decide to go further, because this is fraudulent, basically what we're talking about. And I noticed early on you mentioned work with the DWP, and you seem to be leaving to there now. The word hopefully appears, which is not always that encouraging, that they may take it to court. At what point do we make decisions of that nature? Is that done directly through the Crown Prosecution Service?
We obviously, if we have a case and we feel we have sufficient evidence to proceed with any criminal charges, myself as the manager and my opposite counterpart at DWP will give our opinion on the case. So if we decide that this is sufficient enough to go to CPS, ultimately it is CPS's decision based on the evidence that we provide. So it is all down to the quality of the case, the quality of the evidence, the quality of the interview, questioning techniques and so on. But ultimately, as the prosecuting department, DWP and CPS would have that decision. If they decided not to, and as I say, obviously things have slowed down since the reintroduction of joint working, and we haven't gotten to that stage yet where CPS are making decisions. But should they decide not to proceed with anything, and I still feel the case warrants a level of sanction, then we have other sanctions which are like formal cautions or penalties available to us, which I will then reconsider if CPS don't want to proceed with this. If I think the case is strong enough and the nature of the offence warrants a sanction given to the person.
Did you want to come back, Gordon? Or you?
Is that?
You're on mute, Gordon. Still on mute.
Sorry, my iPhone went on. My apologies. I tried to switch it off. Yes, that's interesting. And are we actually then saying that we never ourselves, other than through DWP, go direct to Crown Prosecution Service to ask for advice on other aspects of what will amount to fraudulent claims?
On joint working cases, we always have to use CPS. On non-joint working cases, obviously we seek advice from our own legal team and proceed with cases ourselves, but that would just be on non-joint working cases. The agreement and part of the agreement to recommence joint working is that on all cases that fall under the joint working umbrella, CPS ultimately make that decision whether to proceed or not. But like I say, if they don't, and I feel we can then separate the cases. So if they don't want to proceed, we can then pull our case back to us, and I can then make a decision to decide whether we issue one of our sanctions to the person that's committed any kind of offence.
Good, thank you.
Great. Mark, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Barry. It's quite shocking to see that from the work you've done on single person discount cases, nearly 50% have resulted in an undeclared adult. That really is quite a shocking amount, and I can see why there's more work going to be done on there. If I can ask, on page 3, on the external fraud, there's a list of council tax, business rates, etc., that you provided on there. Is it possible for you to provide a bit more of a table of year on year for future reports? Because I know you've mentioned that in some areas there is movement to universal credit, so because of that we will expect to see changes in those areas. But by providing a table, it'll also help to identify other possible trends in other areas, so we can look at possible decreases and see why those have gone, maybe ask why those have gone down, or possible increases to see, is there movement in those areas, and question why some areas have gone up, some areas have gone down. Are there particular reasons? Is it just that there's more focus on investigations in those areas? But with just providing the 1 year,
Yeah.
We can't see a picture. So it would be really helpful if we could see a year-on-year, set of data on there, please.
Yeah. Is there I think I only have figures going back to 2016. Do you want it continuously from then? Or just maybe the last 3 years or so?
Well, the previous 3 years or something would be good. Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks.
Peter?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just following on from that question just now. Yeah, is it the case that the 882 were pulled out because of some sort of red flags? Because otherwise it would seem that if you looked into 882 cases and 426 of them had some sort of result, the extrapolation onto your 50,000 accounts would be quite worrying. So I'm just wondering whether they were a particular high-risk sample. And if I may, Chair, the other slightly flippant question I have was, you're getting £11,000 from Carbon Homes to do their right to buy verification, and that's saving them £500,000. So I wonder whether you wanted to charge them a bit more next year. Thank you.
Yeah. First question: the sample batch that we had initially targeted were indeed a high risk category that we have. I think they were very high risk. So they would be the smaller percentage that we went for first to see what kind of results that yielded. I would not expect 50% of the single person discount cases, once we conclude the full exercises, to be withdrawn or have some kind of savings. My estimate would possibly be 5 to 10% on experience of previous cases. So yes, we're very well, either very fortunate or very good at what we've done there. I'll go with the latter. But yes, it did yield a great result. Even though these were very high risk cases, quite often we do find that even the lower risk cases are ones that are actually cleverer at hiding what they're doing in the system. So they come out as a low risk case, but quite often you can see from past exercises that sometimes you yield more results in the lower risk areas than the high risk. Not saying that we're going to get more than 50% from the lower risk ones, but it's a fluctuating kind of arena in terms of results. You can expect from high risk ones a high level of fraud. Sometimes you don't get it, and sometimes you get more results from the lower one. But to answer your question, Peter, yes, this was a very high risk category that we targeted first. And the cost to Benicia and Carbon is actually under review because it's been the same for the last 3 years.
Good. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone else have any questions? Or are we happy to thank Barry very much? And we note the progress and work undertaken by the corporate fraud team since the last report in March 2020 and the steps been taken to recover any monies owed to the council. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Item 5 on the agenda, these are the reports of the Chief Internal Auditor. The first one is the designation of Northumberland County Council's Audit Committee as a group audit committee. This is your Appendix B. Is this Kevin, Alison?
Thank you, Chair. This is actually, it's designated on the agenda as a report of Kevin, but it's actually a report from me as Director of Corporate Assurance.
Great.
So basically, I hope that the report is quite straightforward in the way that in which it's set out. But our external auditor, Mazar, recommended earlier this year that we should consider the introduction of a parent audit committee or a group audit committee arrangements to really enhance oversight of governance throughout all of the entities within the County Council's accounting group boundary. So the Audit Committee will be aware that we consolidate accounts, we have group accounts within the County Council's accounts, and you approve those each year. What this mechanism will do will allow the County Council's Audit Committee as the designated group audit committee or parent audit committee to receive assurance on the framework of governance and control throughout the wider group. So the appendices to the report set out what I hope again is a common sense approach to that, which will mean that at the beginning of the year, the Audit Committee will write to the entities within the group and seek assurance on some fundamental governance areas. We'll receive answers back on those, and that internal or external audit will then also have a role as that third line of defence in the assurance model, of providing, further comfort of clarification to the committee. So the only other thing that I'd mention is that because Audit Committee is a committee of council, it will be necessary for a change to the constitution to be made for the change in the terms of reference which are proposed. So we will propose to take the what was in the appendix to the report to Audit Committee today to the next meeting of full council, where hopefully there'll be agreement to that. We've also made Advanced Northumberland aware of this proposal, so that they are, cited on that. But other than that, I think I would just hand back to you, Chair, and the committee. Happy to answer any questions that there might be.
That's fine. Mark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison, for the report, which I welcome. For some time, questions and concerns have been raised on a number of occasions by members of this committee. And while answers have been provided, I'm sure some members have not been fully confident with not having direct sight or access to some of the information themselves. And I feel that this can only improve the situation. It'll help remove some of that perception that things might not have been taken with the same level of seriousness or severity that members might prefer, and help remove some of those feelings of things possibly being swept aside. But my questions are, like, would reports be presented like at separate meetings or just alongside others at the meetings we currently hold? And also, on page 2, under the key issues, section 2, it states that this is a good practice principle, and I agree, it seems a very sensible idea. So I have to ask why this has never been put forward as a suggestion by the previous external auditors.
Okay, Chair, and to take Councillor Swinburne's questions in order, it's a really, really good question about how this would work practically. And it's a good opportunity for me to make clear that the terms of reference, when the Audit Committee of the County Council is acting as the parent audit committee or the group audit committee, would be in addition to the terms of reference which already exist for the committee when it's sitting in a meeting as it is today. So my proposal would be that we put another item on the agenda, which would be the bit where the committee was sitting as the parent audit committee. So you'd receive an agenda the way you have today, but probably have an extra agenda item. Then any reports related to group entities would consider under that agenda item, according to the terms of reference which are set out in the appendix today.
Okay.
And I'd agree regarding that it's an eminently sensible suggestion that Mazar have put forward. It will join the dots, I feel, to a large extent, and give that needed oversight across all entities, whatever they may be now or in the future. And I can't really give a view on why it hasn't been recommended to us before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think I agree entirely with what Mark said, and I think it seems to be the kind of thing that would be good practice and recommended regardless of the history. But the history has been, I think, put simply, we have lost patience really we've kept asking questions. We knew that they were seemingly a new organisation, trying to put the bad history with Arch in the past, but unfortunately we failed to get any assurance about that. Just a couple of questions on that, and it's kind of sort of background, but what was Advance Northumberland's response to this? Because I believe this has been discussed at meetings before, and they've been quite resistant to the idea of a greater role from NCC in this audit committee.
Okay, I'm being careful about what I say, Chair, because I'm mindful that full council hasn't yet agreed the proposed terms of reference. So it would be seemly and good governance to allow that to happen before we talk, widely about another entity. I would say, though, I think it's fair for me to say that actually officers in Advance who've been at the audit committee and the audit committee itself have been broadly agreeable to this. We raised it at the last meeting of the Advanced Audit Committee, just as a notion that it was something we were working on. I think that there may be different perspectives on how various people who are stakeholders would have wished this to be taken forward. But I think it would be wrong if I left the audit committee with the sense that there hadn't been an acceptance or a willingness for this, because that isn't the case.
That's fine. Could I just, before I bring in Nick, I just had a second question, and then I'll open up to other questions that I'm sure members have got. As has been reported, there's been a 5.5 million set for the liable for a potential claim. Is that the only outstanding claim? And is there any comment that you or Chris can make about the overall stability of the finances of Advance Northumberland that we should be aware of at an early stage? Chris or Alison, do you?
I think on the finances, Chris is probably closer to the granular detail than I. I am aware of the particular claim that you make reference to, but I think Chris would be better placed to answer.
Thank you. Chris, you picked that up. Is there any other claim and any comment about the overall stability of the finances of Advance?
In terms of other claims, we haven't been made aware of any. We have, as members may be aware, a shareholder assurance group, so we meet with Advance on a monthly basis, and there's regular kind of officer catch-ups in between. So they would flag it to us through that sort of forum, but the Farron's claim is the only one that we've been made aware of. In terms of the stability of the company, like the rest of the economy, obviously COVID is presenting some pressures. They have a landlord role, and obviously they receive some of their income from third-party tenants. Again, as part of the kind of the monthly processes we have with Advance, they supply a regular cash flow forecast, and that's reviewed by their board and reviewed again through the shareholder assurance group. So we are monitoring it. Obviously, there are some challenges in the cash flow which aren't unique to Advance. But with the potential second wave there are some signals, that we just need to understand. So at this stage, I can't give you a definitive answer. We have a meeting with Advance urgently next week just to get a full understanding of where we are. So I can report back as soon as we understand the position ourselves.
Okay. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just like for clarification, Chair. There's a rumour going around that apparently there's a 7 million black hole with Advance Northumberland. Could we be reassured or perhaps indicate whether it's true or not, or it is indeed just a rumour? Because obviously this will have massive implications on the residents of Northumberland if there's a 5.5 million claim and a 7 million claim against Advance Northumberland, and that's going to have a significant impact on the council's resources.
Chris, did you want to come back on that?
I think Nick wants to come in, but happy to just echo what I said before. I'm not aware of that 7 million claim, but I need to understand, obviously, as the 151 the council, the true position for Advance, just so we understand our exposure, if any.
Sorry, can I just come back to you? No, Chris, I didn't say there was a claim. I said there was rumours there was a 7 million black hole. and whether that what you can expand on that, or whether no one knows, or it still remains a rumour, or we can be reassured today that if that isn't the case, because it's taxpayers' money that will be paying, in excess of 12.5 million if indeed these two comes to fruition.
I've just referred that I'm meeting with Advance urgently next week to speak with them about their financial position, so I'll be speculating at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could everyone make sure if they're not speaking, they're on mute, because there's a bit of background noise. Sorry, Nick, you were trying to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to pick up on the earlier point around the audit committee. I mean, obviously, I haven't been involved in any meetings at Advance when they've discussed this, but I've certainly discussed it with the chairman, and I think he's always thought it was since it's been raised, he's thought it's a good idea to widen the scope of the council's audit committee to include Advance. It makes perfect sense, and I'm pretty sure that's his personal view, and I think that probably reflective of the overall view. But I think there are other members on this call who are on the board of Advance who probably have a better idea.
Okay. Cameron, did you want to come in at all?
Yes, Chair. Can everybody hear me okay?
Slightly quiet, but we can hear you.
Well, that's unusual for me. I guess the first one thing I would say is clearly it's not advice from us as your external auditor, but it was an observation when we were appointed as your external auditor that looking at other clients, particularly in other sectors where they have significant involvement with subsidiaries, clearly when those are consolidated into the group, the parent needs assurance over the numbers and the accounts, the underlying systems and the control environment, as we do as the group auditor. So in that sense, from our point of view, that seemed to be a relatively straightforward recommendation that we made, I think, quite early to the senior management team and Alison as well. And everybody that we've spoken to subsequently around about that would appear to be supportive, both from Advance and from the County Council. So I'd sort of echo what Councillor Oliver's just said.
Great.
Getting it right might take a bit of time, would be the other point. Local government isn't as well developed in this area, I personally feel, compared to entities we audit within the corporate sector, housing, or indeed the NHS.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be a little bit of time to get it right. But I think the right first step is getting the terms of reference and getting it set up.
Great. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on what Cameron was saying, and I recognise that this has to be ratified by the full council, but I think it would be sensible as an early action for the various auditors, and maybe Cameron and others, to be able to give this committee assurance that the controls, for example, the risk processes of all the constituent parts that we're now being asked to take assurance on, that there's a level of alignment. So in other words, the approach to risk being taken by, for example, Advance Northumberland is consistent with the approach to risk being taken by the County Council, so that we're looking at something that's consistent, and I think that would be just a piece of good practice, just to sort of clear the decks a bit, assuming that we, as this audit committee, take on that overarching role.
Yeah. Alison, did you want to come back on that?
I think it's something that will become part and parcel of the type of reporting that the audit committee will receive, Councillor Hill, under the terms of reference put forward. I think it's a very wise point made by Cameron that we will have to evolve this. It's something where we will start an approach, and it will be something that develops over time. The approach which I've suggested in the appendix was actually based on, I don't know whether Cameron recognised it or not, but one of the approaches which Mazars take to the audit of any entity is to send certain letters out at the beginning of each year to key individuals associated with the entity, to ask those individuals to give a view on certain matters of governance, risk and control, which then the external auditor uses to help develop their assurance map and their plan of coverage for the year. So I've borrowed this approach which Mazars have used in a different form, in a different setting, for a slightly different purpose, but I think it's something that we could use to good effect here. And it also mirrors the 3 lines of defence model of asking the management of the audited entities to give us a view on how they see governance and control. We then use the 2nd line of defence, financial reports, HR reports, and that type of thing, to form a view on whether that seemed to square. And then the 3rd line of defence comes in. But I think the whole purpose of it is that it should allow a flow of information on the entities which will end up being reported in the consolidated accounts at regular intervals during the year, so that if there were to be any areas of concern, that will give us the opportunity as the Group Audit Committee to consider those and consider whether any action is warranted. So it's just basically going to increase awareness, which I think must be a good thing in terms of the governance of the organisation.
And in terms of this process, this could run in parallel with any wider reviews about Advance. I know that has been suggested in different quarters, and indeed members of the public have said, after the problems with Arch, after the problems with Advance, actually, if you look across the newspapers and local government journals, there's lots of problems with these arm's length regeneration companies. And actually, what a number of residents and other councillors have said to me, you had a lot of activity with Arch. Some of it was questionable, for example, very expensive shopping centres, but they seem to be doing something, whether you agreed with it, whether you thought why they're doing it. But a lot of people saying, what actually are Advance doing? So in terms of process, this is not going to interfere in this. This could run in parallel to any other reviews that anyone might raise about the whole future of Advance. Alison?
I think, Chair, it's something that would be almost an umbrella over every other process which is going on. So we must remember that an auditor or an audit committee does not run an organisation. That isn't our purpose. That is for the management of an organisation to do, and there is that very fine framework of checks and balances between audit and management, and the influence that we bring to bear on one another. Yeah. So anything that is being done under the auspices of the Group Audit Committee arrangements would not interfere with the running of the organisation. That would be a matter for the management and the board of those organisations, but it would form a view on how adequate the framework of governance, risk management and control was, in as much as that impacted on the group arrangements for Northumberland County Council. So it's something where I don't know what other reviews may or may not be being considered, but it would not affect them in any way.
Great. Ian?
Yeah, just a couple of points. The Farron's claim keeps getting mentioned. In fact, it's a number of claims, and certainly given the legal advice that Advance has had, the elements of risk associated with these various claims do vary. So it's not a single block, but there clearly is risk in some elements. I'll put it no stronger than that. And could I say, as a former leader, I did 9 years as leader, and I find it bizarre because Arch and Advance were set up after I was long gone. And it seems to me the amount of borrowing and the amount of investment, which is desirable if it's managed well, the county council itself, as the ultimate backstop on those loans, has to have confidence in the information that it has. And I think these proposals moving to a single audit function where we're receiving the advice from a single point and receiving it at a single point to get that overall picture is the sort of service the leadership of this council require, whatever party there might be. Put it this way, if I'd been leader still, I'd have been very uncomfortable about so much money being invested but not having confidence in it. And the information that you base your decisions upon must be sound, you must believe in it, and I think the proposals are the right way forward.
Great. Stephen?
Just to reiterate the point of Councillor Swinbank, that it's basically the Governance Council will run on transparency and visibility. And I think there's been a lack of visibility from my recent experience, and I will admit I'm a newbie to this council, but there's been a lack of visibility in some areas. My recent experience of large corporate organisations such as the NHS and civil service is that they're probably a little bit further down the line in terms of this sort of visibility than we are here. But I think, as Cameron said and Alison has said earlier on, we're on a little bit of a journey to catch up with this one, but it isn't insurmountable. And once the pieces are in place, I think this is going to be a major improvement in the visibility and the governance of this council. So I sincerely applaud this as this move. I think it's a good step forward.
Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. I do too, and raising Ian's points and Stephen's as well, because I do think advance needs to be scrutinised a little bit more, because there seems to be a lot of money around, but there's no action being taken. We can't see any developments. We haven't seen any of this, and they're sitting on land all over, and there seems to be nothing happening. It's full of promises and false hopes, and situations around various areas they're going to be doing bits of work on, but there's nothing come to fruition. So I think that needs to be scrutinised more too, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Gordon?
Yes, I think we have to be careful. We're not a scrutiny committee, and we aren't scrutinising business decisions made by the arm's length organisation. What we are required to do on behalf of the council, and in my view I agree with Ian that this is a step in the right direction, is ensuring that the financial management, the controls and the entire framework is satisfactory in itself, and that it's actually a means of the council being confident that the money that they are putting at risk is being managed in a framework which is acceptable and is in our view. What we aren't able to do is say that was a bad decision you made to do X, Y and Z. We're not a scrutiny committee of that kind, as I understand it.
Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't mean scrutinised as a committee. It just needs to be, it seems to have scrutiny around it, because obviously since it's been taken over by advance, it's been lax. So therefore, scrutiny in a proper and appropriate manner. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Ian?
Just a comment. I noticed the comment someone made earlier about other organisations being further down the road on visibility and issues like this. For my more recent sins, I did 16 years chair in finance for Northumbria Healthcare, so I have worked in these other sectors that seem to be slightly ahead of local government.
Okay. Does anyone else want to come in at all? So, Alison, before just moving to the recommendations, which are to note, and this would just confirm what the next steps would be?
Certainly, Chair. The next steps would be to put a report based heavily on the one before Audit Committee today to the next meeting of full council, which would be at the very beginning of November, and probably that report will reference that the discussions taken place today in Audit Committee, and whatever Audit Committee decide, whether you do decide to note the recommendations and so on. So that would be in terms of kind of making this a real thing, a real live part of the arrangements. What I've also talked to Kevin MacDonald as Chief Internal Auditor about. We've provided a copy of the report before Audit Committee today to advance as a courtesy. And obviously, as I've mentioned, we've discussed it in earlier audit committees that have taken place there. It may also be an idea to take a copy of the report before Audit Committee today as an information item to the next meeting of Advances Audit Committee, which is the middle of October. And then it's formally being considered on their agenda. But in terms of making the proposed terms of reference real, terms of reference for you as a committee, sitting as the group audit committee, it would be to bring a report to the next meeting of full council in November.
Great. So are members happy that we note the advice received from Mazars that the group audit committee should be designated to maintain overall oversight of governance matters across all entities? Note that this role will be expected to be discharged by the County Council's Audit Committee. Note the terms of reference which is proposed will be adopted. Note that the proposed designation of Audit Committee as a group audit committee will require a change to the Audit Committee's terms of reference in the Constitution. Can I just ask, is obviously everyone happy to note that? Can
we not just express approval as well, Chair?
Well, I was just about to say that. So just note what's listed on the recommendations. And can I just ask for confirmation? Obviously, we're not making the decision, it will come back. But is everyone of the view that we welcome this as a positive step? Yeah, can we just switch off that so we can see that we're all supportive of that? Anyone not supportive? No? Perfect. Thank you very much. Item B is the review of the preparation of the 2019-20 annual governance statement, which is your Appendix C. Alison, is this you or Kevin?
Yes, Chair, it's myself.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, members of the committee will recall that during the last meeting in July, the committee received the draft annual governance statement from the Section 151 officer, and during the deliberation and debate around the item, there was a request made for a short report from internal audit covering the process that had been adopted by the authority in preparing the annual governance statement for 2019-20. So that's the report which is presented to committee this morning. The report is a high-level report looking at what we kind of went back to see what's actually required by the Accounts and Audit Regulations 2015, and what are the proper practices that the authority are required to comply with. They are defined as the Delivering Good Governance in Local Government Framework of 2016, which is a document published by CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and SOLAS, which is the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives. Within that framework, there are 3 key principles which are specified in terms of the preparation of an annual governance statement. So those 3 key principles form the basis of the report which is presented to the committee this morning. The 3 principles are explicitly stated within the draft annual governance statement and the local code of corporate governance, which was presented by the Section 151 officer in July. And it kind of explains how the County Council has addressed each of those key principles in preparation of the annual governance statement. So while it's not internal audit's role to audit each aspect of the annual governance statement or in terms of the content, the report today just outlines some of the various assurance sources, which does include internal audit, which were used by Chris as the Section 151 officer and his team in terms of preparing that annual governance statement before it was presented to Audit Committee for approval in July. So, Chair, I wouldn't propose to say too much more than that, but happy to try and answer any questions. And it may be that Chris or kind of Cameron would like to comment on that, because obviously once the annual governance statement is agreed, it then kind of goes through to external audit as part of the audit of the statement of accounts.
Can I just check, Kevin, what we're being asked to do? We're not actually, because when it came up at the last meeting, do you remember we had quite a debate? Which I think, in hindsight, was certainly at the time, and with hindsight, it's vindicated the decision. We were keen just to note the draft rather than approving. Subsequent events would make that decision, as I say, vindicated. So we're not being asked to approve the annual governance statement or the accounts just now.
No, you're not, Chair. This report is entirely on in response to the request that was agreed by Audit Committee in July for a report from internal audit on the process that had been adopted to prepare the draft annual governance statement. You are quite correct, Chair, in that annual governance statement may change in terms of its content from the draft in July to the final annual governance statement. That would be a matter for Chris as the Section 151 officer and the team. But this was just around following Audit Committee's request for could internal audit provide us with a view on how the annual governance statement was prepared, ready for the draft to come to committee in July. So no, it's not in any way asking the committee to approve an annual governance statement. It's just a report for information at the committee on how the annual governance statement was prepared.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's important, just as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I haven't had any answers to questions about process. And people would say, if you agreed the annual governance statement, they would say, well, hang on a minute, will you not have refused to be allowed to meet? And leaving aside whether the audit committee should have met at that time, it's a separate issue to the fact. And to this date, I have still had no answers to who refused the meeting and on what constitutional basis. And I think that evidently is a concern. It's certainly not the only serious governance concern that we've got at the moment, but that's one that obviously comes to mind. If they haven't even explained why they are blocking the audit committee meeting and who made that decision. Does anyone want to come? Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got grave concerns about this too, and I just hope that we can look at it, because I mean, I think this makes it, if we're going to go ahead and do the governance statement as it is, I think it makes a mockery of our residents of Northumberland for their intelligence, because as a matter of fact, we have tried as an audit committee to try to bring various problems and people's anxiety as to what's going on with the Northumberland County Council, and considering that they've now this administration has still got 4 out of the cabinet who still has got allegedly allegations surrounding whatever ongoing issues, we don't know, that they should have had the decency to step down and be replaced while this is ongoing. We are not now able to look at this, and will indeed there be the right questions asked, and could we possibly find out the questions that will be put forward to the external body who will be looking into these allegations? And I find it we need to, this administration was supposed to be open and transparent, and I find it very, very difficult to agree with anything at this present moment in time that they're saying with around all of this bullying, allegations of trying to to bring people on board about various things, about money issues and payments back, and this is all going on, and the residents have a right to know. And I just think that by holding back the audit committee is irresponsible, and it looks as though there's a massive cover-up. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just can I just say that as I said at the beginning, if we can focus specifically on process, and there are serious concerns. I've mentioned just 2 or 3 so far regarding process. Another one, for example, ridiculous situation where we got a notification of a council meeting and then told that the deadline for motions had passed. And I could go on and give, but if we could just stick to matters regarding process rather than regarding individuals or regarding specific allegations. I saw David first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just reiterating, well, you've just made the point there, while saying let's talk about process, then making a point that was not to do with process, Chair. So I think we all need to be very careful. I think actually, perhaps, Chair, you should have stopped Councillor Grimshaw's grandstanding there, because I think we're skirting very close to difficult legal issues here. Now, when we were considering whether or not there should be an extraordinary audit committee meeting, and I hope you don't mind, Chair, me reiterating what I said to you in person, was I said I had no problem with there being an audit committee meeting to look at the risks posed and to look at the process, as you've just said, Chair, to look at the risks posed by us having a change in terms of the leadership at officer level, and the chief executive being on extended leave. And we're looking at the risks to the council of, in terms of governance, of the allegations being made. But we were not, as has been said in this meeting already, we are not a scrutiny committee, and we are certainly not, as you yourself said, Chair, we are not a court, and we are certainly not a kangaroo court. And I think we need to be very, very careful in this, sitting here going on about allegations about this, that, and the other, as if they were fact. These are not proven facts. These are allegations that our job is to make sure that due process is followed. And if we sit here grandstanding about allegations and repeating them, and using, you know, couched legal language, saying, well, these are allegations, and then just listing them off, we are not sticking to simply looking at the risk and the process and governance. So I would just caution other members of this committee about doing so. And I'm pleased, Chair, that you have intervened and said that we need to just continue to look at process and at risk. Now, I'm happy to do that. My second point is, I understand that the reason, and I suppose it's a question, I understand the reason why the extraordinary committee meeting was not allowed was because that was the view of our own internal auditor. It doesn't, you know, to me, there was no hint that there was any interference with that. So if that question is able to be answered today by the internal auditor, the internal audit team, then I would like to hear the answer. If it is not, then I will understand why not.
Well, can I just, I made it clear that we're not talking about whether the audit committee should have been met or not. I'm talking about the fact that the audit committee was refused, but not, and we weren't told who refused it and on what constitutional basis. So rather than you mention grandstanding, scoring points, or trying to defend members of the administration or deliberately attack, please can we keep politics out of it? All I'm interested in is the process. And the process was that the audit committee had been given assurance it could go ahead, and then there was a block put on by that, and wasn't told, you know, by whom and on what constitutional basis. And that evidently is a concern, whether or not I had conversations with all the auditors, and their conversation was, I'm not 100% sure that this is the right time to have it, but if that's what you want to do. I spoke to all members of the audit committee apart from Gordon, who was on holiday at the time. They agreed it was a good time, but it's completely separate debate about should it have gone ahead then or not. It is simply the fact that, and this is happening in so many things, you're not getting any answers to questions to say this is the person that can make the decision on the process, and they've said no for that reason. Okay, fine, I might disagree with it, but that's the process, and that is obviously a great concern.
If I may, Chair, first, I'm not defending anybody, because as we all agree, this is not the place for making allegations, prosecuting allegations, or defending allegations. Not defending anybody. I'm simply cautioning other members of the committee who appear to be trying to turn this into a kangaroo court when it is not. The second point was, if Alison is able to do so and give me an answer to the question as to why that meeting was refused, then I'm sure we'd all like to hear it, because you're saying we haven't been given any answers. If Alison is not able to answer that question, then I fully understand, and then I think we should move on. Thank you.
Alison, do you want to come in?
It's certainly, Chair. I'll be glad to outline my understanding of the situation. I don't know whether or not the request, I'm aware that Councillor Hill made a request for an extraordinary meeting. I don't know whether Councillor Hill ever received an answer to that request, which alludes to the point which Councillor Hill is now making about process. So certainly early on, after the extended leave of the Chief Executive was announced, Councillor Hill and I had a discussion about whether it would be reasonable to convene an extraordinary audit committee. I was very clear, I think Georgina will attest, that I didn't think it was the right thing to do at that juncture. And the reason why I didn't think it was the right thing is down to the role of the audit committee. So the role of the audit committee is to maintain an oversight on matters of governance, matters of risk and control within the organisation. Other processes would be brought to bear on some of the other things which appeared to be going on at the time. So for me, it was a question very much of timing. There will be a time, if there are governance implications indicated in what has happened or happening, where the audit committee will rightly expect to receive information. But my view was, at the time that Georgina and I had the discussion, that was too soon in the process. We needed to let the other due processes take their course. So just to be clear on that, but I think that the point that Councillor Hill has made about who makes decisions on things like extraordinary audit committees, whether we have written rules of procedure where we can all look at them and follow to see what the process would be, I think that there is clear evidence that that could do with some strengthening within the organisation, and that's something which Kevin and I have had a separate discussion about. It was unclear how the decision would be made, who would be made, and as Councillor Hill's just confirmed, she didn't receive an answer on that. So that's something where I think as an organisation we could strengthen our arrangements.
Well, if I may, Chair, then thank you for that, Alison. Now, see, we're maybe getting into semantics then, but I totally agree. It is important that, having made the request, that the chair of this committee should have received a formal response to that. But it seems to me, and I don't think it's ridiculous to infer from the answer you've given, that the reason that the meeting didn't go ahead was based on your view that it was inappropriate to do so at that time.
No. David, it wasn't. And I think
So how do you know it? Because you haven't had an answer.
Because I've had numerous conversations with Alison and Kevin, and we had a discussion, and we probably agree about 90% of the time, which is probably ideal. Because if you said that people agree 100% of the time, you'd say people aren't usually independent thought. So we had a good discussion, and I said, I really think this should go ahead for X, Y, and Z reason, for things I'm hearing about the whole risk framework in the background of COVID, etc., etc. And the last conversation had, well, it's ultimately up to you if you want to ask for that meeting. That wasn't the reason that the meeting was refused. Now I'm sticking purely to evidence, and the fact is the meeting was refused, and I wasn't told by who and on what constitutional basis. I have been told some things confidentially, call it whistleblowing, that who refused it, and they had no constitutional basis whatsoever to refuse it. It was completely ultra-virus who put pressure on to say that that meeting had to be refused. So it certainly was not refused on the basis of thoughts, shared discussions about timing with Alison or Kevin or anybody else. And I still have had no response whatsoever from that.
What's the next step then? What's the next step then, Chair? Because if we're saying there is, and Alison seems to be saying there is something to be looked at here in a failure in process potentially, what's the next step? What do we do about it?
Well, I think certainly we need to review the Constitution, and this isn't hindsight. People might remember that I advocated a review with Councillor Roughhead. We were very keen that the Constitution needed to be reviewed. It was quite surprising that the people who take an interest in this and proposed it weren't invited to be on the working group who were looking at the Constitution. when it came back in November, and it's evidence in the minutes, I said this has been a tick box exercise. This has not changed the Constitution in the way that it should be. They've actually done a great job. Unbelievably, the Constitution is even worse than it was. And it's so vague and open to interpretation. It really needs seriously revised, and I think that will be something that I don't know, Alison, we'll propose that, or I think I know other officers and councillors have noted that. I think it's a general acceptance now that that constitution needs urgent clarification.
Could I come in there, Chair? The framework of governance of any organisation is constantly going to change. It will never stand still for a number of reasons. There'll be changes within the entity, there'll be changes in the environment outside that we need to respond to, which is why risk management and maintaining a good governance framework is as important as it is. So day by day and week by week, as the year passes, various matters which will impact on the governance of the organisation for good or bad will come to light. And what internal audit and external audit will do is maintain a watch and brief on that, as does the audit committee. So in terms of internal audit, it will be a matter for Kevin, and I'm being very, very careful that Kevin, who is, rightly wearing the mantle of Chief Internal Auditor, will decide on coverage from an internal audit perspective. But as set out in the annual governance statement, the report we received at the last meeting of Audit Committee, our framework of governance isn't only internal and external audit. There are a web of strands which contribute to that. So certainly I think that there are some procedural processes which could do with being strengthened, or the codification of them being strengthened so that it is clear to an intelligent member of Audit Committee or member of the public how the process is meant to work, and we can follow that. And Kevin and I will have a discussion about that. But there are other, the senior management team of the organisation will have a view on that. So we will take them forward through the relevant process that we can identify. It isn't all internal or external audit. Regarding the substantive matters of events, as I mentioned at the beginning, there will come a time where it's probably likely that that the audit committee will need to receive information at a suitable juncture, and that's something that again the acting chief executive, myself and Kevin will consider further and bring forward at a suitable time. But I think there is a collective responsibility about the governance of the organisation. All employees play a part, all elected members play a part. It's obviously incumbent on the most senior managers of the organisation, who have most influence and control, to bring some of these things to pass and to happen. Internal audit forms a check on whether that is indeed happening, which is obviously important, as does external audit. But I think that for me, just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, there's a question about role of the audit committee and timing, and there is a separate issue about processes and clarity about those processes. We identified some things we think could be improved. We'll take them forward through the most appropriate way that we can.
Great. I think it's probably worth noting as well that a similar thing happened with a request for an extraordinary meeting of the full council as well. So I've seen Stephen, then Ian, and then Nick. So Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think we've obviously drifted quite a long way from the start of this item, which I can see Kevin smiling at. I think it seems like a long time ago, Kevin, when you started to present this paper, and we've come quite a way around the houses since then. I think we're probably trying to risk maybe going too far and too much depth and too much granularity in some of the recent events, which are probably, if I can respectfully suggest, maybe it's not the place and the time to do that. But I think we have identified a couple of key things, to sort of paraphrase Councillor Townsend and Alison. I think the key thing, going back to that word again, is clarity. clarity, and there has been a concern, I think, over the last few weeks about where the clarity, where the visibility sits, and where the lines of communication sit. And from my perspective, looking at this from just an audit committee member's point of view, it doesn't seem to be in any clear path, any kind of roadmap of how do we work through this. And I think it's too easy to actually point the finger and blame individual people or say that that particular part of the assurance function didn't do its job. We don't have a proper roadmap at present, I don't think. This isn't the time and the place to actually try to work that out. I think we've all got a kind of a general agreement as that. I think part of the reason we asked Kevin to take this document away and actually come back with some sort of a little bit more meat on the bone, if you like, a little more clarity, was because we felt that there wasn't a great deal of clarity in there. I think he's given us a bit more assurance of how the process works there. But I think from my point of view, I think if we could really just resolve today to take it forward, that we need to get more visibility and clarity on where the process are. Because I think rather than go over past history, which isn't going to help anybody, that is the resolution we should get out of this. And I thank Kevin for doing this document, because it does give a bit of assurance as to how things are put together for that assurance governance phase. And that is exactly what we wanted last meeting. For the future, and talking about all the past issues that have happened for the last 4 or 5 weeks, if we could maybe park them for this meeting, because I don't think it helps to go over them again and again and again, and just resolve that there is a need for clarity, and can we take that forward to some future venture. And that's just the point I wanted to make.
Thank you. Ian?
Well, in recent weeks, I don't think, to my memory, I've made any comment in the public domain whatsoever. So I will talk about something else. What is the role of audit? It's to dig around. It's to tease out. It's to ferret around. It's to turn stones over. And if it finds nothing, that gives confidence to the community it's representing. And it seems to me that certainly when I am leader of a council or chairman of a committee, that unless there is a legal reason that is put to me why something cannot happen, it happens if I want it to happen. Now, what I've heard here today doesn't cover that. Who took the decision? And frankly, what's that expression we use in the Northeast? Cack-handed. If I've ever seen an administration draw attention to itself by hasty decisions, I have certainly seen it in recent weeks, and I don't like it because it damages the reputation of local government in Northumberland. I'm saying this in this setting. Now, for heaven's sake, the administration appointed the chair of this committee. Wouldn't have been my choice, but that is what it is. And I think it is when she thought it was necessary to have a meeting and was denied it, that is disrespect. Do you want her as chair? Do you want to remove her? What are you playing at, quite frankly? You're not playing your cards very well. I put it no stronger than that. You can see I'm a little bit frustrated because I just hate the reputation that this council is developing. Right, enough said.
Nick and then Lynn.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was a bit slow, but I could have possibly curtailed much of this discussion if I'd been a bit quicker. But finding an email, I was sure I'd seen something. There was an email sent to you, Chair, by the interim chief exec on the 12th of August, explaining the view that she'd taken advice from the monitoring officer and Alison Mitchell and the external auditor that an extraordinary audit committee meeting wouldn't be appropriate at this time. So I think hopefully that clarifies all of the the above issues.
No, it doesn't, Nick, because there's a lot more. You've been very selective. There's been a lot more that went on after that, and Kelly has put a hand up, so I'm going to go to Kelly.
I haven't seen anything that's gone on after, but I'm just saying that email was sent and it does exist. So I think it's clear advice as to why there was a view that there shouldn't be an audit committee at that stage. I wasn't involved in any of those discussions, and nobody discussed it with me. But I just want to put on record that it has properly been considered.
Put it on this record, and it's very frustrating. I've said a simple factual thing, that a meeting was refused and I was given no explanation by who and on what constitutional basis. It's a simple evidential fact. and to have people picking and choosing and try to defend the indefensible. Kelly, I'm bringing Kelly in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, there was further correspondence after that that email, which was a further request from Councillor Hill for a meeting. Officers have provided advice throughout this, including to Councillor Hill and to other councillors. But just to be clear, that it wasn't an officer decision as to why the meeting shouldn't be convened. I can just leave it at that.
Thank you, and I think that is the best place to leave that at. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm astounded. Frankly, I mean, I've been accused of being political, etc., and I haven't actually. It's just, I'm just speaking on behalf of the residents who have been in touch with many of my colleagues just to ask what's going on when the Audit Committee has been refused on many occasions. As an experienced councillor like Councillor Hill has been refused, and we find it absolutely disgusting. I mean, the latest email was, could we just follow the legal proceedings and associate cost exposure, complaints to the local government ombudsman, complaints to our auditors, adverse audit opinions, and instability to agree annual governance statements, significant long-lasting reputational damage in the council, and becoming increasingly dysfunctional. And I agree with Councillor Swithenbank when he says it's an absolute disgrace. And if indeed there has been a whistleblower to say it hasn't come from our internal auditors, that's even more worrying, because there lies another incidence of bullying. And I'm sorry, Councillor Hill, if people on this committee think that I'm going above and beyond, but I find this still absolutely disgusting.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hill.
Point of order, Chair. We are going around in a circle here.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good point to move on. Thank you.
I think the point has been made, and sticking just to specific process, the Chief Executive has confirmed that no officer was involved in the decision, and the Constitution has no provision for any councillors to refuse meetings. It has a provision for the business chair to call a meeting, or for 5 councillors to petition for one. So I think we'll draw the line there. Regarding this report, Appendix C, does anyone have any further questions on this? No? Well, thank you very much, Kevin. It is recommended that we consider and note the work performed by internal audit in reviewing the preparation of the annual governance statement for 2019-2020. Show of hands just to show that we've noted and considered it, and thank you very much to Kevin and the internal audit team for that. Item 6, urgent business, if any. To consider such other business as, in the opinion of the chair, should by reason of special circumstances be considered as a matter of urgency. Now, the overriding point that I made at the beginning about a lack of assurance or answers to questions regarding process, the Chief Executive is now going to present a report which sets out a new arrangements and obviously staffing issues. It's going to touch on staffing issues, so we'll need to move to part 2 for that. What I would just add, I've had representations from at least 4 councillors who have asked me to raise this issue, and that is that the Constitution has set out that and this is in the public domain, that any suspension of a senior officer can only be for a maximum of 2 months, and we're getting to that point. So before I seek approval to move into part 2, is there anything on what I've just said that and about the new framework that you can briefly say, Kelly, to the public and other councillors watching before we discuss confidential detail which does relate to staffing? Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. I think the only brief thing that I can say is that as a council, it's very publicly known that we have a large number of risk and governance issues which are impacting on our day-to-day business as a council. These issues are taking a significant amount of officer time, and I personally would like to, in the private part of Audit Committee, would like to talk through with members of the committee what assurances I can give them in relation to a wide range of governance matters, and I'd be happy to present something further to the next Audit Committee in part one, which would provide a wider assurance if required, following consultation with the Chief Internal Auditor and the External Auditor.
Alison, is there anything you want to say before we move into private session?
Nothing in the public part of the meeting, Chair, but there are some things that I would like to bring to the committee's attention, but there would be exempt information.
Right, okay. Thank you. Can I ask if everyone is in agreement that we move into part two? Agreed with that. Thank you very much. If we can turn off the recording and just somebody confirm that that's been done.